Thank you very much, Samir, and good afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I run a team of analysts that monitor armed conflict around the world, and we recently published our annual armed conflict survey. In addition to analyzing individual conflicts, we'll also try to identify overarching conflict trends. And this year we identified three. One is the growing involvement of criminal actors in conflicts. One is the increased victimization of civilians. And the third one is the merging of transnational and local dynamics. This third trend manifests itself in multiple ways. And one has to do with climate change and global climatic changes and how they intersect with conflict dynamics locally. And I thought it was, given that climate change is a theme in many of the discussions in this conference, that I would bring a different dimension to this debate. Climate change is a high probability, high impact security threat, and we estimate it is likely to accelerate in the coming decades. I'm not here to say that climate change actually is a driver of conflict, but certainly it's a threat multiplier. And what do I mean by that? Well, climate change can exacerbate existing drivers of conflict. It deepens existing fragility, it places additional strain on weak institutions, it reshapes power balance and also undermines post-conflict recovery. And both long-term trends such as sea level rises or desertification and short-term variations such as seasonal variations and extreme weather conditions can influence social and political stability, especially in conflict and fragile states. But the effects can be both direct and indirect. There are storms and droughts that can damage livelihood and may lead to water scarcity, hence leading to competition over resources, natural resources, that might actually result in violence and conflict. Poor harvest due to adverse weather might result in price fluctuations of food commodities on international markets, which would then undermine food security and fuel grievances locally where those crops are produced. And if you might remember, at the time of the start of the Arab Spring, especially in North Africa and places such as Egypt, increased food prices as a result of bad harvest seasons were among the grievances that spurred the instability that we saw afterwards. And of course, there is the issue of displacement, climate-induced displacement, people leaving areas badly affected by climatic change, moving elsewhere, and often putting strains on already a very limited resources among receiving communities. And we've seen how this has resulted in some tensions between the newcomers and the local communities. Many countries that are highly exposed to climate hazards also face underlying security fragilities. And where these vulnerabilities compound each other, they are more likely to have destabilizing effects. And this is evident in a number of countries across the African continent, particularly in Nigeria, in Sudan, in Somalia, and the DRC. And importantly, as these countries already face fiscal and capacity challenges, they are likely to struggle to implement climate adaptation measures, making it harder going forward to address these problems. I wanted to use a concrete case study to just explain how this nexus between conflict and climate actually manifests itself. And I will refer to the Lake Chad basin region. The Lake Chad in West Africa, and it comprises territories of Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Cameroon. This is also an area that's been battling a conflict with the jihadi insurgency of Boko Haram and Islamic State in the West African province since 2001. Importantly, in 2017, the UN Security Council formally recognized the climate change dimension of this security crisis. So this challenge has been firmly put on the security agenda. The Lake Chad is, of course, a key feature in the local economy because of fishing and also agriculture. However, since the 1960s, the lake has shrunk by 90%. However, over the past 40 years, the population in the region has tripled. So you can only imagine the pressure on natural resources, access to a lake, and also the overall economy. This has generated even higher than usual levels of unemployment and a growing trend of conflict and tension between nomadic herders and farmers that compete over access to grazing land and also access to water. The situation in the region is already, from a humanitarian perspective, very dire. 2.5 million people, as of December of last year, had been displaced by the violence, by the conflict. And 10.7 million people rely on humanitarian assistance just to survive. Because of the conflict and the activities of the insurgents, but also of the armed forces, access to the lake has been further restricted and fishing has often been banned. Also, the fighting has impeded the delivery of aid and also the implementation of climate adaptation initiatives. All of these factors combined together significantly increase the vulnerability of the region and really the vulnerability to climate change and its impact. These high levels of unemployment, not always, but often, have forced, especially young men, to join violent groups. And this is also something, is one of the multiple factors that might drive people in the region to join both criminal and ideologically driven violent groups. The challenges of climate change and the resulting unemployment actually have a significant impact in terms of the mobilization and reintegration of former fighters, something that's already started, but once we reach the post-conflict phase, will be even more prominent. As I said, fishing has declined, if not stopped at times. Impact on agriculture and trade has been significant. So if we want to retrain and reintegrate these young men into society, we need to provide them with jobs. Unfortunately, those jobs are not there. So just to reiterate, I'm not arguing that climate change leads to conflict, and indeed focusing exclusively on climate change would be a mistake, because it would divert attention from actually addressing the true causes of conflict. However, I really like to stress that climate change is a threat multiplier, and it should indeed be a factor in conflict prevention, peace building, and stabilization effort across Africa and elsewhere. Thanks.